Hello, I'm Jeff Sawyer, CCI's Director of Employer and Professional Network Development. This Future Forward segment features Joyce Maroney, a recent retired technology executive. Joyce retired from the high-tech industry in 2020. Her 40-plus year career in technology with IBM, several startups, and most recently as the founder and executive director of the Workforce Institute at Kronos, has given her exceptional experiences informing her perspectives on both the technology career field and the workforce more generally. Joyce graduated from Middlebury in 1978 with a degree in biology, followed by an MBA in finance from Boston University. Joyce is joining us to share her learnings from her extensive career in technology, including the current composition of the industry trends and dynamics, and action steps current students may want to consider to position themselves to enter this field in the future. Joyce, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Great. Joyce, just to set the stage for our conversation, can you give us some ideas as to the scale and relative importance of the tech industry as a career option for students?
Sure. One thing that people are often curious about is how big is the tech industry relative to others, and I'll kind of confine my remarks to the US. So one source of great information about the entire portfolio of industries in the United States is the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. It defines high-tech industries as those that have a high concentration of STEM workers, so science, technology, engineering, and math. So a lot of people, when they think high tech, they think hardware and software. So it's not really confined to just those segments. When you look across, there's all kinds of different mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, cloud storage companies. There's all kinds of buckets of industries. And when you add that all up, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says it's about 20% of the GDP of the United States and probably 10% of the jobs. So it's big. There's lots of opportunity there.
And that's great, great news for students. So if we think about, I know you had mentioned confining your comments to the US. Let's take a small step back and just kind of put the context around the technology industry as it relates to global perspectives. And I'm just curious if you've got a perspective on where the US stands competitively with other leading countries in technology development and deployment.
Sure. I'd say the US still really towers over much of the rest of the world when it comes to the investment capital that's available behind technology to start and to grow technology companies. The US attracts a lot of international workers into its technology industry. I mean, all of those high-tech segments need STEM graduates, and there's plenty of places in the world where there's lots of high-quality STEM graduates who don't have as many opportunities in their home countries. There's also tons of innovation going on in China, in India, in Russia, in Israel. So there are plenty of very smart people with really great ideas all over the world. A lot of the money behind the development of tech is still in the US, but it is not confined to the US. And certainly major centers in Asia, like Hong Kong, in the UK, like London, they're big sources of capital for high-tech firms as well.
So I'm sure many viewers are wondering, okay, if I'm not a STEM major, is this something, an industry that I should be considering? What are your thoughts on that?
I think this is kind of a common misconception that when people think about high-tech companies or STEM companies, they think it's all about software engineering or hardware engineering. And engineers are absolutely critical to any kind of tech firm in that they are the builders of the products, if you will. However, tech firms, like most other kinds of companies you can think about, need people in human resources, in marketing, in sales, in finance, in legal. So all of the supporting cast members, if you will, team members that you can think of who would be in, I don't know, Nabisco, you still need them for high tech as well. So really there's, I have met a lot of people with anthropology or fine arts degrees in the tech companies I've worked in. So I don't think anybody should rule themselves out as a candidate for employment at a tech firm without investigating that a little further.
In terms of the liberal arts degree, as it relates to STEM career fields, what are some of your thoughts on that front?
I think it's hugely important. And I know we're going to touch on some of these topics later in our conversation, but there is no advancement in tech or really in pretty much any company without people who are always challenging the assumptions about what's worked in the past, who aren't thinking about new categories that the company could get involved in, who aren't thinking about new customers, what would make those customers happy, what would make those customers loyal. And even when you think about nonprofits or government sector, those principles still apply. I mean, innovation is not confined to technology innovation. It's how do we provide support more quickly or more effectively? How do we prepare ourselves for the scenarios where things aren't going well? How do we manage risk in our company? These are all things that require critical thinkers, having a knowledge set like sort of a history, and being able to reference general approaches to the world and to strategy that have worked in the past that might aid you in a business situation. Those are the kind of things I think you learn at Middlebury that are absolutely going to be valuable to you in any environment that you might work in the future. But especially in tech, where there can sometimes be an over focus on technology being the answer to everything, and it isn't always. And it's very important to be just as focused on the human side, both for employees, but also for the people who are going to be consumers of whatever good or service that you are contributing to putting out there in the world.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your own experience. You have undergraduate major in biology.
Yeah.
Ultimately finding your way to places like IBM, and then into the hardware software side of the technology industry. Tell us a little bit about that pathway.
Sure. Well, when I was at Middlebury, I was very focused on getting into medical school. And as it turns out, I did not get accepted into medical school right out of Middlebury. And at the time, while that was disappointing, what I did have was a terrific education, and one that was very focused, heavily focused in science and math. And so one of my earliest job opportunities that I was able to pivot to out of Middlebury was learning how to be a coder for control data. A company doesn't even exist anymore, but I had after a couple of years of continuing to try and find a path into medical school, I decided I really did not want to become a PhD in biology or pursue a non-medical school path in healthcare. So I got an MBA, but when I came out of my MBA program, I still really had that itch around something that seemed more scientific, more data-driven. And so I got hired by Control Data to learn how to be a programmer, but a programmer who would sell the programs that I was developing. So it was a very interesting job. So I went from Control Data to a sales job at Software AG, to a training job, training other salespeople at Wang Labs, and was recruited from Wang to Lotus Development, which eventually became part of IBM. So I was getting involved in the software industry at a time where there really wasn't much of a software industry.